people there with more robotic types of minds will say, so what? So that's the way it is. Well, it isn't. If you really look at it, and you look at it very, very closely, you will find that maybe there is another universe where things go together, where all things come to a beautiful, absolute coherence, with nothing left over, perfect symmetry. And I try to refer to that. I don't like the word God because it has this anthropomorphic connotation to it. And people make an awful lot of bad things out of that, these days. But I call it the Godverse to kind of relate it to everybody's idea of a function, if you see what I'm trying to say. And you can call it the All-verse, if you like, if you want to be secular about it and so on. So what I'm saying is that there is probably a basic duality, from between which our universe happens as a mixture of two things. On the one side, you've got a pole of absolute harmony, if you like, and on the other, to put it simply, and on the other side, you've got the pole of chaos, where all things are so chaotic they can't be really, if you see what I'm trying to say. You don't get to perfect absolute chaos, obviously, logically. I think the physics minds will immediately see that, so I'll say that anyway. But in between, that's the interesting place. The potential difference between these two opposites generate in mixture big bangs that make universes like ours with both components coded in it. Now, the trick is to find where what is, so to speak, if I may say that. So this potential difference between the two means when you get one opposite against another, you get a problem. You get a huge differential. Rather like, I'll put it this way, to give an image to people, you've got the grinding wheel moving, and that's movement and vibration, and you've got the chisel that is still coming into contact with the moving grinding wheel. What happens in between? Sparks. So if you want a simple model to see this whole thing, the sparks, each spark, if you like, is a universe happening, a combination of both things and their interaction, if you see what I'm trying to say. So whilst a potential difference, that's not an adequate description of a full potential difference, it will do for people who haven't got a mind trained in all kinds of complicated things and so on. So, the point is that simple model then tells us, hey, what happens to that spark? It goes out, it comes out, it blazes up, and then it dies. Pretty similar to what's going to happen to our universe, don't you think? So therefore, why does it happen? What are we here for? These are questions that all children might ask. I know my grandchildren do, and I'm really hard put to try and follow some of these guys and how fast they think and so on. And so, the point I'm trying to make is there is something wrong here that we have not been told, or we're not guessing at, or we look over. And I think that the great teachers, if you look at their pure statements, I'm not talking about the things that men have done to their words, and all the trouble starts there. I went back into all the ancient scripts and all the rest of it as far as I could get to the best sources, usually the things that common religious invective throughout in the past. I thought there was some reason they did that, and you discover a real can of worms. It really explains why these rascals, what's happened is, if you throw those things out, they all lead to Pope mobiles and Cardinal Cadillacs. See what I'm trying to say?
I see what you're saying.
And you've got the con built into it all there. Then you see what I'm trying to say. And I think that we ought to look, each of us ourselves, go and find out for ourselves, rather like your program's doing. Trying to make people think for themselves and so on. And you'll be amazed at what you will be able to see. So in the end, you've got two poles. And there's great hope. We have a system we call life and death. Well, I believe that livingness is natural. It comes in with the universe. And we can trace, you see, our lines back, can't we, Ian? We can go from our present status right back in time to our grandfather, great-grandfathers, and so on, right the way back, right to the beginning of the universe in a living line. Now, to me, that living line, which is passing information down all the time, is a soul. Very simple. Nothing heebie-jeebie and all this kind of business. A simple line, derivational intelligence and information coming through to us finally at the end.
So that's the interface to God, to all that is.
Yeah, well, I don't know about. I call it the God verse, and I call the center of the singularity in the middle of it all, the center of it all. I would call that, if you like, Godhead. If you don't want it to be some anthropocentric, being like the fellow on the Sistine Chapel roof touching Adam's finger, if you see what I'm trying to say. The white man with the flowing beard or the blue man with the whatever, We make God in our own likeness. And in fact, if you look at the actual customary attitudes and ideas of God, and I write that as carefully as I can in the book, it all is an absolute nonsense. It's just a magnified daddy and mummy, or lord of the manor. He's jealous. He wants praise. Now, come on. The universe is bigger than all that nonsense, really. Come on, So the point is that we want to believe so much because I think we all have a memory coming from the ancient past that we were once magnificent beings that through restriction and perhaps running with the second law, with our will and our natures to believe, we fell for things and we're all still trapped here for that reason. But, and this is where you get these religious people coming in, from time to time you get some wondrous wisdom coming and saying to us, we can reverse this. We can actually go back of our own individual aegis if we think and act in a certain way. So if the second law of thermodynamics, incidentally, to atomic things breaks them up, then you would expect there is something else. If there's another, as I say, a God verse and its opposite. Everything has a duality, hasn't it? You go yin and a yang, a plus and a minus, a positron and an electron and whatever, and you have this kind of always the duality, which then implies a continuum. And I think that in order to continue to go on or not, you must have this at least a duality and imply a singularity just simply because a duality exists. Now, to try to explain that, it's taken me several chapters in 2 books, but I'm hoping that people will, if they find that too heavy, because you have to actually, justify it with quantum ideas and so forth, trying to write it as reasonably as possible for everyone to understand, because it requires training, basically, to try to understand how these ideas work and so on. And so when we put the whole kind of thing together, I think we'll find that there, in the middle of all of this, is a wonderful, logical story that gives us great hope. It's not fearful, except where we got something like a mechanical intelligence with quantum intelligence that is not connected up naturally to these things, that is made and manufactured and programmed. And if you program something like that, you give it artificial intelligence, and you do it in some fantastic capacity, then I think the creators better watch out. Because you cannot tell a thing like that all the information it needs for you, the creator, to be allowed to exist. It's called a paradox. Now, I won't go on that at the moment. We can take that on later. I'll go back to that and explain why this is a paradox. But I think Dr. Silverman might want to say something here about this whole situation.
Well, it's an interesting one. I think it was something written about by Asimov, actually, the science fiction writer, that if you do try to program a robot to protect and defend its creators as well as itself, the problem is that it can't actually understand what the difference is between something living or something with a mind and something that doesn't, and that it will recognize that actually, because its creators or its manufacturers, if you like, actually know the codes, know how it was produced, how it was put together, and all of that. They're its biggest enemies, because they also must be the ones who would most be able to work out how to deactivate it. So if you program it to protect itself, ultimately it's going to have to get rid of its creators. That's the only way it can be sure to in its program terms, survive. Of course, it's not surviving in the sense that we know survival, because it's not actually alive.